Welcome back to Capitol Square. This week, President Obama laid out an ambitious agenda to change the nation's gun safety rules. And it's, of course, following that deadly shooting in Newtown, Connecticut.
Yeah, in fact, he signed 23 executive actions allowing the government to crack down on gun crimes, improve background checks with more mental health reporting and information, sharing, increasing school resources, and of course supporting mental health with more teachers and counselors.
He also called on Congress to enact universal background checks, ban new military-style assault weapons, limit ammunition magazines to a maximum of 10 rounds, and toughen penalties on gun traffickers.
While reducing gun violence is a complicated challenge, protecting our children from harm shouldn't be a divisive one.
All right, so the president's new gun proposals were quickly met with reluctance on Capitol Hill. A spokesman for House Speaker John Boehner said the House won't make a move until the Democratic-led Senate passes legislation, and some of the proposals are even a tough sell for some Democrats.
What we absolutely need to be doing is doing things that actually achieve a result, and that's not something I'm convinced will achieve the intended result.
There does appear to be some consensus on a few of President Obama's proposals, like cracking down on gun trafficking and imposing universal background checks. A harder sell, a nationwide ban on assault weapons, something Columbus Mayor Michael Coleman supports. He says Columbus police confiscated 120 assault weapons last year. Although he says many were bought legally, they ended up being used to commit crimes.
Those guns were not made for hunting. They were made for killing people. That's why they're called assault weapons. They're used in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in war, and they're now being used in the streets of our cities all over the nation.
Ken Hansen with the Buckeye Firearms Association here in Columbus does not believe a ban will make a difference. He calls President Obama's actions more symbolic than substantive.
How many times do we have to try an assault weapon ban and see it fail to have any impact on these sorts of shootings before we recognize that it's just not the way to move forward?
Joining us now to discuss the gun control debate, Republican strategist Terry Casey and Democratic strategist Dale Butland. We thank you and welcome you both to the sofa.
Terry, let me ask you first. I mean, it seemed, if we roll back the clock 20 years ago, there was a group of Republicans, included John Kasich, who was in Congress at the time, and former President Ronald Reagan. There was a group of Republicans who kind of jumped on board the ban on assault weapons. We don't seem to have any Republicans that think that's a good idea this time around.
Well, part of what happened is when it came up in '04, and by the way, George W. Bush supported its repeal. It didn't get the support in Congress, and a lot of people forget.
No, he supported it staying. He didn't support the repeal.
Well, right, he supported continuing it. Part of the problem is there's a lot of Democrats, including Harry Reid. Harry Reid this past week has been very negative on the prospect of this, and people forget that Harry Reid and a lot of other Democrat senators from southern and western states voted against the original assault gun ban, and a lot of questions have come up, and in fact a lot of people feel part of the reason Al Gore lost the presidency in his home state of Tennessee and states like Arkansas was over the whole gun ban effort by some Democrats. So there's division in the Democrats, and also if you've read in the past week, New York Times, Friday's LA Times went into detail on the checks before people can buy and the problems in that system. So a lot of people support that idea. The question is, how do you make it work? How do you make it effective?
And Dale, there's a question mark, right, of whether that decade of the assault weapons ban was effective or not.
Yeah, but but I think your question though goes to a more interesting point. Even the sainted Ronald Reagan, who every Republican now repairs to as being the founder of all wisdom, even Ronald Reagan backed an assault weapon ban. You're quite right. It's a measure of how extreme the Republican Party has become. Not just Ronald Reagan, going back to Richard Nixon even. I mean, everybody supported common sense gun control laws. The problem has been the NRA has been very successful in ginning up fear on the part of their members that any common sense gun regulation is going to be a slippery slope that's going to lead to gun confiscation. But it's ridiculous. I mean, reasonable regulations don't turn into slippery slopes. Because we have a speed limit, because the government can impose a speed limit of 60, doesn't mean that they're going to lower it to 30 and then 10, and pretty soon nobody will be able to drive.
And there's so much here, but I wonder if these people in Congress are listening to their constituents, because there are so many polls that say that the public thinking has sort of changed since the first assault weapon ban was put into place.
Well, this past week, two major polls came out. One was NBC, Wall Street Journal. The other was CBS, New York Times. And they both looked at a number of different options. And literally in last place was gun bans. People, and I think smartly and correctly, look at things like parental involvement, parental responsibility, mental health issues, other factors such as the Hollywood entertainment industry. I mean, in both of these polls, when the Hollywood entertainment industry gets worse ratings from the American people than the NRA does, it raises questions that it's more than just attacking the NRA if we're going to deal with this.
Yeah, but look, there have been, Terry, literally dozens and dozens of studies done about violence on television and in movies. Not only do the studies show that there's no link, but the proof of the pudding is every other industrialized country, English-speaking country, gets the same entertainment we do. Japan invents those violent video games. Canada gets the same movies we do in television. So does England. And yet you don't see the gun violence in those countries. So this link with that, I think, is pretty remote. That's not to say we shouldn't look at it. Of course we should.
But the
Everything should be on the table.
American people feel differently, as reflected in the polling.
But the American people also, but these polls, Terry, that you quote, also show that 80% of the American people and 80% of gun owners say that they support universal background checks, where these gun show loopholes...
It's actually higher than that.
Where the gun show loophole is closed, but the NRA still opposes that even.
All right, Dale and Terry, just getting warmed up for our two sides debate, which is coming up on the other side of this break.
They are going to weigh in on President Obama's second term and whether he can work with Republicans in Congress. Stay with us.